Hey guys, FilthyRobot here, bringing another guides, tips, and tricks video. This time we're asking, how good is the Leper? And let me just answer that. I'm going to go totally out of order here. How good is the Leper? The Leper is an absolute pile of garbage. The Leper is the worst class in the game. The Leper is not worth using or playing with ever, and the Leper is a complete disgrace to the team and should be shot, never recruited, and not let in the team. So now we got that out of the way. Let me give a quick disclaimer. I'm talking primarily from the perspective that you're approaching the hardest content in Darkest Dungeon, that you're playing in hard mode, often with no light, and the strategies that I'm going to be talking about and the problems and strengths of these characters is going to be designed to be approached from that perspective, that you're encountering the hardest stuff that you could do. And the thought process is anything that works in the harder levels will also work on the easier levels. So let's talk about the Leper. All right, so the Leper stats. High HP, that's good. I really like high HP. That's awesome. Very high HP too. I think the highest in the game, or maybe the second highest in the game. Low to medium dodge, which is fine. I don't really value dodge very highly, so I don't really care if I have a lot of dodge there. 4 speed. 4 speed is the lowest in the game. Maybe I think it's the absolute lowest, but it may be just around the Crusader speed. Which is really, really bad. Low speed means that opponents consistently go ahead of you, means you consistently go last, which means opponents consistently get extra actions in that they wouldn't if you had been faster. Low crit percentage is not such a big deal to me. I don't really care that much about crit percentage on my characters, especially if I have very, very high damage, and the Leper has the highest damage in the game. The Leper's damage is even better than the damage that an Abomination has when the Abomination's in his transformed form, which is awesome. That means his 19.5 is just as high as it goes, which is pretty damn awesome. So that's the highest damage in the game. That's really good. 120% stun resist is awesome. Having your characters be stunned is really annoying and can lead to death, so not being stunned is a big deal. 100% blight resist is slightly above average. That's decent. 70 bleeds a little bit scary, especially in this expansion where there's a lot of enemies that create bleeds on you. But yeah, so that's not good. 80 disease is average. 110 move is fairly decent move resist, which is important for characters that don't like to be shuffled, like the Leper. So that's good. 100 debuff resist is above average. 70 trap disarm is below average. It means you're not going to be doing very efficient trap disarming, but that's okay. There's lots of other characters who can. And moving forward 1 and moving 0 backwards is pretty restrictive. There's only 2 classes that have this, the Hellion and the Leper, and both of those classes are in a lot of trouble if they get shuffled because they don't do very well outside of the first 2 positions. And the Leper is particularly bad for this because unlike the Hellion has, I believe, 3 abilities that can be used outside of position 1 or 2. The Leper has 0 abilities that can be used outside of 1 or 2. Every single one of the Leper's abilities require they be in position 1 or 2. So if they get shuffled to something like position 4, that means you have 2 entire turns where you move from 4 to 3 and then 3 to 2, where you can't do anything whatsoever. And that's a big deal. But overall, the chassis is okay. High damage, high HP, high stun resist, those are decent. A little bit slow, and the movement's pretty bad, but this is something we can work with. This is a chassis that is perhaps even better than the Hellion's chassis, and the Hellion's an excellent character. So what is the problem with the Leper? Why is the Leper such a useless character, and why should you never ever play with the Leper? And it's really to do with the skills the Leper has. Let's talk about the Leper's role. The Leper is a damage dealer only. Leper has no stuns, has no stress heals that affect other characters, has no heals that affect other characters, and those are literally the roles I recognize: stunner, healer, stress healer, damage dealer. So the Leper is a damage dealer and is only a damage dealer. Well, where can the Leper deal damage to? It turns out the Leper can only deal damage to position 1 and 2. The content in Darkest Dungeon is the way to beat the harder content in Darkest Dungeon is you treat the fights in a very simple manner. The early part of the fight is a race, and it's a race to kill the high priority targets who are almost always on position 3 and position 4. And then after you kill those high priority targets, who are often stress healer or stress nukers or very high damage dealer characters or something like that, you then are dealing with the characters in position 1 and position 2 who are often much weaker, and the goal is to take as much time as you can to recover off of those characters on 1 and 2 to heal your group and to stress heal your group. The Leper can only do damage to position 1 and position 2. Those are the only real reliable damage dealing attacks they have are Chop and Hew. Hew is an AoE for the front 2 ranks, and Chop is a single target to the front 2 ranks. That's pretty bad in of itself. That's Actually, that's terrible in of itself. It's the only class that has this restriction. The Crusader at least can stun the front 2 ranks, even if he can't really do damage past the 2 ranks, or he could stress heal during that. The Leper stress heal other people, that is. The Leper can't do that. So the Leper in the race part of the fight is almost entirely worthless. He can't contribute to the team killing the high priority targets. And he can't stun the lower priority targets that can still do things like crit you or cause damage or disrupt your team. He can't control them at all. However, Hue has its uses. There is a single boss fight I can think of where this is useful, and that is the Undead Crew. The issue is, unfortunately, that the Crusader has a anti-undead buff on the Crusader's AoE, and the Crusader's AoE hits the same targets, and probably the Crusader just ends up being a better character to bring on that, especially since the Crusader can stress heal throughout the rest of the dungeon. But if you had to bring the Leper to a boss, you could bring the Leper to the Undead Crew, the Drowned Crew, whatever it's called, and deal with it there. Hue would actually be useful there. But the big problem with both of these abilities is actually the accuracy mod. The accuracy mod does scale up across the course of the game, but it remains about 20 less accuracy than skills of a similar level at a similar power. So if you look at Intimidate has about 105 accuracy. That is the rough accuracy that most skills have at this level. So these are about 20 accuracy lower. That means the Leper's high damage is actually inconsistent high damage. You could take that and just multiply it by the hit percentage to get a more accurate rendition of what his actual damage is. And worse than that, inconsistent damage is, in my opinion, in Darkest Dungeon, worse than low damage most of the time. Because what you're actually trying to do, and you spend multiple rounds doing this, is you plan out what your characters are likely to do for the round in order to eliminate the highest threat targets and control the targets you can't fully eliminate. The Leper adds a big slice of RNG to that. Suddenly you are not able to accurately predict what targets you'll be killing versus what targets you won't be killing, because sometimes the Leper just fucking misses, and he misses a disproportionately high amount of time compared to anybody else. This is particularly annoying with the way that reinforcement mechanics work. You want to extend each round to the maximum potential number of turns you can do that you can recover in without risking additional stress or damage. So you want to spend a lot of time stunning, you want to kill targets with the last possible action in order to get the most number of heals and stress heals in between. And if the Leper is the last person to act, so the guy who would be doing the killing blow, which he's gonna be because he's so fucking slow, some of the time he just misses that attack, which means you get reinforcement stress and sometimes even reinforcements because your fucking Leper didn't pull the trigger and kill the guy that you need to kill. So he's bad in the early parts of the game, the early parts of the fight, and he's bad in the late parts of the fight. And he's inconsistent on the parts where you do need him. Well, Filthy, you say, you're probably sitting there, you're going, well, with the Leper, you just need to buff his accuracy. If you buff his accuracy, he's not inconsistent. That's kind of true. Let's talk through that, though. The first problem is this. He still can't hit the targets you want. These are his primary damage-dealing abilities. We will talk about his other abilities, but these are his primary damage-dealing abilities. They don't hit the ranks you want. Doesn't matter how accurate you are if you can't project damage to the ranks you care about. So that's the first problem with buffing accuracy. The second part of buffing accuracy is buffing accuracy comes at a cost. The cost, and this is called opportunity cost. The cost is if you run a camp buff, well, you've used camp buff points, these time points, that could be used for other buffs on other characters. So that's opportunity cost. You could run an item buff, an item accuracy buff. The problem is by running an item accuracy buff, you could be running some other item buff, like damage or stun chance or speed or some sort of survivability thing. And then the third option is, well, you could buff prevent. You could use a skill-based damage or accuracy buff. And the problem with that is, well, we'll do the two problems. There's a second part to all of these that we'll get to in a second, is that when you're doing this, you can't do something else. It does happen that in the Leper's case, that doesn't matter because the Leper can't do anything fucking useful anyways. So you could, for example, spend all of your turns spamming revenge on the Leper. And that would be fine. That would address the accuracy problem with the Leper, which means he would consistently last hit the target you want. However, the cost of bringing the Leper is you can't bring someone who's better than the Leper. And with every class being better than the Leper, you might as well just bring a different class. Because the other classes aren't going to have these huge fucking problems that the Leper class have. They might be able to actually stun a target you need. They might be able to consistently hit a target without having to sacrifice camping items or time cost. Or they might be able to do damage to a target that you actually care about doing damage to. So every time we look at how do you fix the problems of the Leper, the answer is you can fix the problems of the Leper by not bringing the Leper. And that's a huge, huge detraction from me wanting to bring this class. So let's talk about the other skills of the Leper. We've got Purge. Purge is a knockback that clears all corpses. It can only be used from position 1 or 2, and it can only hit position 1. This ability is mostly useless. This ability is useful if you have lots of lepers and they can't hit the target you want, and you can use a leper to knock back a target so another leper can hit the target you actually want to hit. Why doesn't this work most of the time? Because A, you'd never bring fucking 2 lepers because you're not bad at the game and don't want to waste your time with terrible classes. But B, it's because if you do have a single leper, by the time you've knocked a target back, a lot of the enemy abilities have built-in portions that fix their positioning. For example, in the Warrens, there's the, whatever the low hit point, high protection mob is who does all the slicing of you. His ability moves him back as he attacks. The cultist abilities move them forward as they attack. The bone archer abilities move them back as they attack. The, what else is there? There's just a number of the zombie abilities move them forward as they attack. There's a number of these abilities that are that their basic attack ability of units that moves them to the position they want to be in anyways. So if you only can move them once per round and not stun them, when it comes to their turn, they often use abilities that help fix their positioning, and their other allies also use abilities that help their positioning. Not to mention, it is a knockback, so not only does it have an accuracy check, it also has a move skill chance check, so it's not always going to do what it claims it's going to do, even when it hits, and it's not always going to hit. So there's multiple checks before this can be useful, and it's just at almost no damage. It's basically a really bad stun, is what Purged tends to be. Revenge, we've kind of talked about. You could Revenge's damage, accuracy, and crit at the cost of dodge and protection. It only lasts for 3 rounds per time, but it will stack with itself. So you could have up to 3 of these simultaneously. But it just honestly isn't very good. You don't want to have high damage versus the remaining 2 targets because you don't care about killing the remaining 2 targets very quickly. So why are you buffing accuracy? I guess you could buff accuracy so you consistently get that last hit so that you don't get stress reinforcements, but it seems like a pretty high cost of having to spam this ability a number of times to do that. All right, what next? We have Withstand. Withstand is a protection buff that is also the Leper heals stress, gets plus protection, and marks himself temporarily with Withstand. That's probably the Leper's best ability. I don't care about the protection portion that much. Protection is all right as a skill goes. It can be very situationally useful. The problem with protection is no matter how much protection you have, you still take full stress damage from stress nukes or crits. So even if the crit only crit you for 1 damage, it still gives you the same amount of stress damage it would if it crit you for like 50 damage or something. So protection doesn't reduce stress damage, which means stacking protection is only of limited use. The plus stress heal is nice, but it only stress heals himself, and it does cost him an action, and I can't help but compare Absolution, the Abomination ability, compared to Withstand. Withstand can only be used in position 1-2, and it only heals stress. It does give you protection, but it doesn't heal stress and health, which means that if you're low on health and you're trying to use the Leper as kind of like a big meat tank where your other units can do stuff and the Leper stands there and takes it, well, he can't heal his stress and his health at the same time. You would have to choose to use his health healing ability. Unlike the Abomination, who if you want to meat tank with him, just have this big lump of meat that gets hit a lot, the Abomination can heal his own stress and his health simultaneously. That said, it's still probably his best ability. Solemnity is a single target health heal. It only can heal himself. It also gives him a bleed, blight, debuff, and move resist. That's decent. Again, the problem is I compare this to Absolution and I go, why would I use that compared to the other skill? This does provide a little bit more health per heal, but it doesn't get the stress part. The blight, bleed, debuff, and move resist is very nice. But again, better than casting this most times would be stunning the target that could hit you. Since he doesn't have a stun, this is an inferior approach to preventing damage. Yes, I can heal damage, but the damage that the enemies are doing, especially at the higher levels, especially on the higher difficulties, often is more damage than I can get in a single heal. In other words, I'm losing health doing this compared to just stunning the friggin' opponent. And I still risk all the stress elements and the crit elements that were there when I get attacked that wouldn't be there if the opponent was stunned. Finally, there's Intimidate. Intimidate was just recently changed. I actually think it was a nerf, hilariously. Intimidate was what I thought was the Leper's best skill previously, where it AoE'd the front 2 ranks and gave them a minus damage buff It might have given him a minus accuracy buff before as well. I don't quite remember. But this now marks himself and gives a minus damage buff and a minus protection buff to a single target. The target can be in any position. It has normal accuracy, which is the only skill the Leper has that has normal accuracy. It has 105 accuracy at this level, and it will scale up, which means it will hit fairly consistently. But it has a minus 85% damage mod, which means he's only doing 15% damage with this ability. So you can potentially use this to help deal damage to rank 3 or 4, which means it might potentially be useful. But a minus 85% damage mod means it's going to be doing a very, very small amount of damage to either of those positions. Probably not enough to do damage consistently, to kill consistently, but at least it can project damage a little bit. The debuff element of this is fairly weak. You don't tend to care so much about the damage element on an enemy. Again, you care about their stress, so if it was crit, that might be nice. You care about their health, so if it was damage, that might be nice. You care about preventing them from acting. That would be nice. And you care about preventing them from acting because that is removing 26% of their damage is no way near as good as stunning them, in which you've removed 100% of their damage and remove their ability to cause stress from a stress nuke and remove their ability to cause a critical, which is doing additional damage and stress. This is just a small damage reduction to the opponent, and the minus protection element is situationally useful, but probably not as useful as hitting the stupid thing. And to be honest, there aren't a lot of high protection enemies in rank 3 or 4 that you worry about. Mostly you worry about ghouls, who are high protection and high stress. They're a very high priority target, and things like Swinatars or this type of stuff, which are decent protection, in which a protection debuff would be nice. But mostly those enemies occupy position 1, 2, which is the only time the Leper can actually hit something. So the one time you have a target, you're like, man, this target, I would really like to hit him, and I'd like to hit him really hard. I've got a Leper, I can hit him really hard. And then he's the target with protection. You're like, I guess I could intimidate him and lose 85% of my damage. There's just very little synergy with this skill in the Leper. Honestly, it just doesn't do what you need it to do. So basically, what kills the Leper? It's not the chassis. The Leper chassis is okay. The speed's a bit of a problem, but the rest of his stuff is actually decent. High damage, high stun resist, high HP. The bleed stuff's a little bit scary, and the move stuff's a little bit scary. It's the skills. The Leper's skills are just really bad skills. And when you compare the Leper to any other class, you almost always want another class. All right, let's talk about the camping skills the Leper has. Quarantine. Quarantine is really good. It does 20% damage to the Leper. Who cares? And it only costs 3 time costs, which is great. And all companions have a 50% chance for each of these effects to occur. So you can have both of these effects occur, and it actually happens fairly regularly that both of these effects occur. You either lose 20 stress, or you lose 15 stress, or you can have both of those occur, or neither of them, which kind of sucks. But it can be a very nice stress heal, and it's fairly cheap. Reflection is great in the sense that it gives accuracy to a class that needs accuracy, removes stress, which is good, and gives some crit chance. The big problem is you're bringing a Leper. All right, Bloody Shroud, also fairly good. There are 3, I believe, resist buffs in the game. I think the Abomination has one, which is self-only. The Antiquarian has one, which is cast on others. And the Leper has one, which is self-only as well. These are good buffs, resists to have, extra bleed, extra blight, and move and debuff a little bit less so. But bleed and blight in particular are excellent on a particular set of bosses. I'm thinking things like the Flesh, but also a lot of bosses just have bleed and blights that are really nasty. So being resistant to that can be extremely good. The problem is it's on the Leper. Let the Mask Down is fairly weak overall, honestly. It trades 15 stress across the party for minus 25 stress on the Leper. The Leper has a self-stress heal in Withstand, so most of the time you don't really need Let the Mask Down. The Leper is going to be standing around going, what the fuck am I doing anyways? So you might as well spam stress removal. So it's pretty rare that Let the Mask Down is going to be all that useful. You generally don't want to swap stress from the Leper to the party. You want to swap stress the other way around. You want to swap stress from the party to the Leper, so the Leper can cure it off with his skill set. So this is kind of backwards, this skill. All right. Any special restrictions? The Leper is religious. That's not actually much of a restriction here. It's actually perhaps a slight increase in utility, since the Leper can't combine with the Abomination, which is a bit of a bummer. But the Abomination is a good character, and you might have a chance to use the Abomination. The Leper's not, and you're never going to use the Leper, so you don't really care if you can't move with the Abomination. That doesn't impact your gameplay whatsoever, because you're not using Lepers. So that restriction really isn't that big of a problem overall. However, it could be a slight buff if you insist on using Lepers out of some bizarre form of masochism, or just, I suppose on a challenge mode in some sense. I'm actually doing it right now on my challenge mode. I am using Lepers, and I'm doing that in part to make my gameplay harder. So if you're playing on NG Plus and full darkness mode and full leper mode, well, the religious part actually is a little bit of a buff because there are camping skills that the Vestal has that can actually positively impact religious characters, and the Leper is indeed a religious character. Okay, so overall ranking for the Leper, he is the worst, period. The worst of everything. I was going to say the worst character in the Darkest Dungeon game, but I kind of like just ending the sentence with the worst. Very low power character. You're mostly going to be very disappointed in the Leper's performance in all ways. And I really strongly recommend you just don't recruit Lepers to your team. There's no reason to do it. They don't fulfill any role that anyone else can't do. The only thing they do is they put big numbers on the screens. If you like seeing big numbers, the Leper is maybe the big number guy for you. But it's not particularly good for your game to have big numbers appearing randomly on the screen on characters that you don't want killed anyways. So if you do tend to use the Leper, good luck to you. But I will not be doing that unless I have to. Anyways, guys, hopefully this was entertaining and informative. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.